Hi PE Econ class. This is the third and final video for Chapter 7, in which we'll discuss anticipated inflation and the business cycle and the real interest rate. So far we've discussed price indices, and that's the method by which we measure the rate of inflation. But let's discuss anticipated versus unanticipated inflation. We sort of expect that over the course of our lives, the prices will, in general, they will rise. Current economists or people who follow the markets would argue that anticipated inflation is around anywhere between 2 and 5%. We could put a number on that, and let's say that anticipated inflation, let's assume that for us that it's 3%. That's what we anticipate. That's a quotes around it because this is not necessarily real, but let's assume that it's 3. Then we have other type of inflation, which is unanticipated. Unanticipated inflation is, like it says, not anticipated. But what that means is that the actual rate of inflation is higher than we expected it. Suppose that actual inflation rate was closer to 5%. That would actually be very good if you were a debtor. For example, I have a loan on my house, and my housing loan is set at, let's say, 5%. I have to pay back that much in interest on the principal for my house. But if the actual inflation rate is closer to 7 or 8%, that means I'm actually paying less money. Not nominally, but in real terms. I have I owe money with less purchasing power, which means the bank is sort of losing and I am winning as a debtor. So that's how unanticipated inflation is good for debtors. Now, let's go down here to the real interest rate. The book goes into this, and I think it's worth kind of seeing it as a mathematical formula. The real rate of interest is what the nominal rate of interest is minus anticipated inflation. You're a bank. You charge interest on loans. But the interest you charge on loans isn't the real interest rate. The interest rate you charge on loans is a little bit higher than what you expect inflation to be. If you were a bank and you set it at the nominal interest rate at what you think inflation is going to be, you wouldn't be gaining any money. You would be actually losing in the long run. So let's assume, going back to my housing example, that we have the nominal interest rate of 5%, and we're going to subtract from that what the anticipated inflation rate is, which is 3%. Which means that the real interest rate in this example is 2%. That's what banks are actually making from their investment. Sorry if you saw that. That's lame. Then next we have the business cycle, which is the last part of this chapter. This section deals with what happens in a recession and in an expansion. Basically, we have two axes, and the book says this is business activity. You could also define it as GDP. And time. And over time, we have a red trend line which says that we are sloping upwards as an economy. Our economy is growing over the course of time. Over the course of your life, the economy should grow if everything goes well. But within this trend line, we have peaks and we have troughs. Those refer to the high and low points. And in between a trough and a peak, if we go upwards, that is called an expansion. And disregarding definitions, a downward sloping thing is a recession. So that is the end of Chapter 7. Chapter 8 is all about GDP, how we measure the economy, and circular flow.